All right, well, welcome to the virtual assembly today for April 6th. Thank you for joining us. Today's virtual assembly, it's sponsored by Wasak's Platinum, one of Wasak's Platinum partners, the DLR Group. They are an integrated design firm that promises to elevate the human experience through design. Notable services that they provide include architecture, interiors, acoustic design, MEP design, pre-design, security electronics, and space programming. And fitting with today's theme, they do specialize and work really well when it comes to historic preservation. So you can learn more about DLR Group and all of our WASAC solutions over at wasac.org, and be sure to check them out if you are interested in any kind of design. So thank you, DLR Group. And then I will pass it over to Chris Moore, Executive Director, who has the Historic Courthouse Grant Program. I think I got that right.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Mitch. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all on this beautiful sunny afternoon. But my name's Chris Moore. I'm Executive Director with the Washington Trust for Historic Preservation, and we support administration for the Historic County Courthouse grant program, which is actually a program of the Washington State Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. So I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. But first, just wanted to thank everyone for being here and thank all of you elected officials, county staff, because really at the end of the day, you are all the real stewards of these great historic courthouses that we have across the state. So I'm going to share screen real quick and we'll jump right in with the presentation. And if I could just get a thumbs up that everyone can see the screen. Perfect. Okay, great. So as I mentioned, this is about the Historic County Courthouse Rehabilitation Grant Program. The program has been running since the 2005-2007 biennium. So it's been going. We are now, I believe this will be our 14th funding round. We are over 20 years in terms of the program. And really, when it began back in the 2005-07 biennium, it was because of a lot of hard work of WASAC and probably some on this call, probably some predecessors, but who really identified the fact that courthouses across the state need attention. Those historic courthouses need attention, and wanted to establish a program that would help support counties be the best possible stewards of their courthouses. So part of the reason we do this, and in just a couple intro slides as we get into this, the state does have a really wide range of historic county courthouses that are fantastic, and they run the gamut of architectural styles and location as well. So Columbia County, hopefully many of you have been to Dayton and been able to visit this courthouse, but it is our oldest courthouse still standing in use as such from 1887. And then the most recent, one of the more recent ones is the Kittitas County Courthouse in Ellensburg from 1955, and very emblematic of international style, a modernism, more modernistic style of courthouse, but also eligible because of the fact it is over 50 years old. So eligible for county courthouse grant funds as well. So it's great to see this sort of spread of styles and locations, of course, and different architectural designs, and just the kind of breadth that is covered. So quickly to go over some of the basics. Again, I mentioned the program started in 2005. DAHP, Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, we call them DAHP, really, again, at the urging and with support from WASAC, did a study back in 2003 that looked at this great range of courthouses across the state and determined that there was quite a bit of need from the standpoint of capital projects that needed to be done. And back then, in 2003, it was was about 90 million overall in need to courthouses, at least half of which was specific to those historic character defining features that really make these buildings what they are. So the first biennium, there was a $5 million allocation from the legislature, came out of the capital budget, and that was what started the grant program. I think we did about 8 or 9 grants in that first round. That went out to counties as matching grants. Since that time, as the slide notes, there have been 29 counties that have received support through 88 different courthouse grants over that 20-year period. So we're really pleased to see that great just participation and great use of the program. I think that's why it has stuck around for so long, because it is well used and well supported. And part of today's webinar is to announce the next funding round and go over some of the application particulars as we look to the 2027-2029 biennium. And so we have now opened up those applications, and they will be due on July 10th of this year. And I'll explain about how that works and what the timing is, but do keep July 10th, 2026 in your calendar. That's when they will be due. So I want to go through just some program particulars, and I will take a moment to stop and ask questions. If you do have questions as we're going along the way, please do feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll try to get to them during some of those natural stopping points. I will also include links to our program requirements along with the application guidelines and procedures. I'll include those links in the chat at some point when I catch a breath here. And make sure folks have those as well. And for certain, I will follow up with direct emails to each of the counties that include those documents also. So you'll have plenty of touch points to make sure you've got that information in hand. But first and foremost, the whole program is designed to preserve our wonderful historic county courthouses. And so I just want to go through the eligible activities in terms of what the grant will fund. I won't read every single word on here because you have it in front of you, but really because it's a preservation grant, those grant dollars are really going to be prioritized on preserving key character-defining historic features. So what's a character-defining historic feature? Well, the entire exterior masonry, exterior details, public interior spaces that have integrity with regard to historic features, interior finishes, interior woodwork, murals, interior stained glass, windows are character-defining features. So all of these elements that really speak to the historic nature of the courthouse, that's what the funding is going to focus on. But also eligible are accommodations for ADA. That's certainly something we want to make sure that, and I know a lot of counties work really hard on that ADA compliance and finding ways through design to make courthouses as accessible as possible. Seismic retrofits, while they are not necessarily the key historic preservation piece in terms of a defining feature, if we don't have courthouses that are protected against earthquakes, it's not just a life safety issue, but it's also obviously a key issue for the preservation of that building. So seismic retrofits are eligible activities. And then I mentioned life safety as well. Seismic certainly falls into that category, but other life safety measures. The two bottom points I just want to mention, system upgrades, things like HVAC, mechanical, elevator systems, heaters, boilers, those sorts of things, along with general repairs, they're eligible as match. And I'm going to get into more about the matching requirement of the program. But because those are more behind the scenes and not kind of those historic characters, grant funds can't go to those things specifically. But there is a match with this program. All counties must match a certain amount of any grant funds with local dollars. And these types of upgrades, improvements can count toward that required match. Okay, so ineligible activities, general courthouse maintenance, things that are just the general annual maintenance that occurs, that's not allowed. Although I will be absolutely willing to talk to any and all counties about what constitutes maintenance, because if you do have something cyclical like, masonry rehabilitation that needs to happen because there are cracks or there's been some settling or you need repointing, that is not general courthouse maintenance. That would be something that we would consider an eligible activity because it does deal with those historic character defining features. So don't think just because you need to do some repointing that falls under maintenance. We're talking about more of that daily or annual ongoing maintenance that we just say is not eligible. A&E fees, those architectural and engineering design fees, the grant funds are out of the capital budget, so they have to go to capital work. So the funds will not support, in terms of direct grant support, architectural or engineering designs. But again, those expenditures can count toward the required match. So they still become expenses that are not lost, so to speak. Project planning falls under that same category. If you need to do a engineering study before you start getting into designs, or if you need to do a mortar analysis, grant funds can't be used to support those. However, they can, expenditures associated with that kind of project planning can count toward the match. And then finally, of course, lobbying, reduction of debts. You can't use grant funds for those efforts, nor would those be allowed to be used as match, obviously. Okay, the evaluation criteria. I'm not going to take a lot of time to read each one of these, but I'll hit on a couple of them. First and foremost, the courthouse either needs to be listed in the National Register of Historic Places or the Washington Heritage Register. Courthouses do need to be historic. If a courthouse is not yet listed, but has been determined eligible for listing in either the National Register or the Washington Heritage Register, then that makes you eligible to apply as well. The caveat here, and you'll hear this over and over, is that if you receive funds and your courthouse is not yet listed, it will be a requirement to get it listed in either the National Register or the Washington Heritage Register as a requirement of the project. That's something that needs to get done. We want to have basically as many of our county courthouses listed in those registers as possible. And one last thing I'll say about them, because I know this comes up a lot, and there's real concern about, geez, does inclusion in one of these registers mean the building has to be retained like a museum or we can't touch it? And the answer is no, absolutely not. The standard that we use is the standard for rehabilitation, which I'll talk more about as well. And that standard for determining whether work is appropriate or not is really rooted in the fact that we want to keep these buildings working, viable buildings. And there's an understanding that some changes will need to occur. We just want to make sure that those changes are historically appropriate. We want to prioritize retention of character defining features and historic elements, but there's an understanding that there needs to be some adaptation. So I want to be very upfront that inclusion in these registers does not mean suddenly the building is like shrouded in amber in any way, shape, or form. Also, I will note that both listings in either the National Register or the Washington Heritage Register are honorary only. There are no sort of requirements around those listings. They're honorary only. There are some requirements for those who receive grants, and I'll get into those a little bit as well. But I just want to kind of demystify and debunk some myths that might be out there about what historic designation means on either the National Register or the Washington Heritage Register. I'll say it with the hopes of not getting confusing, but there is a third designation type, and that is local listing. So some of you do have courthouses that are listed on the local register of historic places. Those have some different requirements because that listing is established and done through a local preservation ordinance that happens in your local city or county. We don't require that as part of the state courthouse program, and So that's not an element of this work. Okay. I think the other things to key in on are the public visibility component that is aligned with those historic character defining features, and then that degree of urgency. We really want to know what is the degree of urgency associated with the work, what is the potential of losing historic fabric if the work doesn't happen. So really information on those pieces. And then the last few are kind of around the feasibility. How ready is a county to go ahead and implement this project, and talk about that feasibility. And then, of course, the last one is the percentage of requested state funding the applicant intends to match with funding from allowable sources. And in essence, this is a way to say, the match requirement is a sliding scale. And I'll talk more about those details in a minute, but this is just one of the criteria that this steering committee reviews when they look at work. Okay, some more program particulars. Because we are seeking or hoping that the legislature will appropriate additional dollars to this, those funds would come out of the capital budget in the 2027-29 biennium. And so what that means is whenever the legislature allocates or appropriates dollars in a specific biennium, that's when those dollars have to be spent. So right now we have this application round open, and what it means is we'll be gathering applications. There's a steering committee that will review those over the summer. They will submit their recommendations to Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. And then DAHP will have a prioritized list of funding recommendations from 1 through 10 or through whatever. And then as part of the agency's budget request to the governor's office, they'll request funding for the courthouse grant program. We won't know whether that funding actually comes to fruition until the legislature completes their 2027 session. So all of this work is preliminary. It's to get ready for projects that would happen in that 2027-2029 biennium. So hopefully that all makes sense. And again, because of those rules, any expenditures have to occur, in any expenditures that counties are seeking reimbursement for have to occur within that biennium. And similarly, any of the match that will accompany the project also has to occur within that biennium. We do have an exception to this, and this is, I think, an acknowledgement by the agency and by the steering committee, an acknowledgement that counties, capital work, capital projects that counties need to implement for their courthouses don't always fall on the timeline of this grant program. So there is a quote unquote retroactive component, which says that if there have been county expenditures after January 1 of this year that have gone to the courthouse for capital improvements, those expenditures can count toward the required match for a new project moving forward. So it's kind of that idea, if something came up, if you had something planned, you needed to do some work, we want to acknowledge that that work was done, provided it was after January 1 of 2026, and then that can count toward the match. The same program requirements apply. The work has to be historically appropriate, and it has to meet the other program criteria. But if it does, then those prior expenditures can count toward match for a new project moving forward. And then I've already mentioned only those projects that address historic features are eligible to be reimbursed with the grant dollars themselves. Those other projects can count toward match. Okay, a few more pieces on this. All work must comply with the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the rehabilitation of historic properties. And I've got more information on that, but basically that is a long-winded way of saying work to the courthouse must be historically appropriate. It doesn't mean there can't be any changes made, but it means we want to prioritize those historic features, historic elements, and historic fabric to the courthouse and retain that wherever possible. The 5-year standards compliance requirement. This is really well, there's one of it's one of two things. I mentioned the other requirement earlier about National Register or Washington Heritage listing that comes out of this. Many of the county courthouses already have that designation, so you're sort of, check the box on that one. But one of the requirements is for those that aren't, again, they must be listed by the end of or must have a nomination submitted for listing by the end of the project. The other one is kind of the insurance policy, if you will, for the agency in making grants to county courthouses. And that's this 5-year compliance requirement. What we ask of counties that receive grants is for a period of 5 years following completion of the grant project, that when the county is undertaking additional capital projects, that you consult with program staff, consult with DAHP to make sure those capital projects, again, are in compliance and meeting the historic standards. So that's something that is in place for 5 years. It's not codified by an easement or anything like that. It's sort of just the contractual agreement that's made. And it is not everything. We don't want to, again, we don't want to know when you're changing light bulbs or something like that. It is if you are going to be doing a major capital improvement that means moving walls or replacing elements or adding security components or something along those lines. Then we just want to know so we can work with you on designing that in a way that is going to best address the historic features. People say, what happens if we don't do that? What happens if we do something within that 5-year period and it doesn't meet the standards? Then the county would just not be eligible to apply for this grant project, for the grant program again. So that's sort of the outcome of failure to comply with the 5-year piece. Okay. Grant funds are, per state law, available on a reimbursement base only, so counties have to do that work, and then you're reimbursed up to the amount of the grant. And the match dollar has to be the first dollar in. So let's say, just to use round numbers, you got a $20,000 grant. You did $10,000 worth of work and you wanted to get a progress payment. You could submit all the paperwork around that $10,000, and then you would receive $5,000 in reimbursement, in grant funds reimbursed to you, with the other $5,000 being the match. So that's the reimbursement component, with the notion that match dollar is the first dollar that has to be in. And then one more thing, those courthouse projects that are defined as, in counties defined as distressed, do receive some extra consideration. I think the agency and the steering committee understand some of the challenges in our distressed counties. I want to note that it does not guarantee funding or funding recommendation, but there is extra consideration given for counties that do find themselves in the distress classification per the cited RCW. Okay. Before I just go on to the next slide, I'll just take a quick moment and see if anyone has any questions. And there'll be some time for questions at the end, but this is a good stopping point. Feel free to either raise your hand or just come off mute or put something in the chat. And if there aren't questions, I'm happy to keep going. Okay, great. So in the 27-29 biennium, I think I went through this already. The Courthouse Steering Committee reviews those applications, make recommendations to the agency with a ranked list of projects from 1 through whatever. There's no cap on the amount that can be requested. I think our largest grant ever was about 2.7 million. And the smallest has been in the realm of 10 or 15,000. I think on average, it's probably if I were to average it all together, it's probably somewhere in that 250 to 350,000 range as an average, of course, with some outliers there. But there is no cap on the amount that can be requested, although I would argue that there's probably not going to be a $10 million grant award made. And that's something I'm happy to talk to each county individually about. And then finally, the biennium. Work must be complete by June 30th of 2027. This comes back to when funds are appropriated through the capital budget. They're appropriated for the biennium, which will end June 30th, 2027. That said, what I will say is we have certainly had counties in the past who have not completed their projects within that initial biennium. And essentially what happened in that case, if if you receive a grant award and we get towards the end of the biennium, or even earlier in the year, we would want to really be in communication with each county to find out what the schedule looks like. Do you really think you're going to be able to meet this? And in cases where counties think they may need an extension, the agency can request a reappropriation from the legislature to essentially push those grant dollars forward into the next biennium to make them eligible to be spent in the next biennium as well. And that has happened. In fact, I think every single biennium we've run this program, that has happened. But I always say, and this is the caveat, is that there's no guarantee that reappropriations will be made. It's a request of the legislature. There's no guarantee that the legislature will reappropriate dollars from one biennium into the other. The track record is it's happened. But I just can't guarantee that it will happen moving forward. So we always start off from the standpoint of we want to be able to see this project be able to be complete by the end of the biennium, which would be June 30th. And sorry, it would be 2029. I got my dates wrong. I will correct that. The biennium is the 2029 biennium. So this would be work must be complete by June 30th, 2029. Okay. And I see, Heather, thank you. Commissioner Dudley Nolet, I will address that in just a second. But June 30th, 2029 would be the end date for any projects. Okay. All right. Before I jump into this, actually, I'll mention this. We talked about the historic designation. In short, if you aren't sure, let me, reach out to me. I can let you know. As I say, many of our county courthouses are already listed in the National Register, and a good opportunity to answer Commissioner Dudley Nolet's question as well. Are there limitations on counties who have received this grant in the past? And by limitations, I'm assuming that is with things that can be done to the courthouse for future projects. As I mentioned, any county receiving a grant does commit to following the Secretary of Interior standards for future projects to that courthouse for a period of 5 years following grant project completion. So what does that mean? It means we wouldn't want you to tear the courthouse down. It means we wouldn't want you to replace all of the original windows with vinyl windows in the courthouse. Does it mean you can't update systems? No. Does it mean you can't update lighting fixtures or install security measures to the courthouse? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means we would want to work with the counties to find the best design solution to make sure as those new projects are implemented, they're done so in a way that best is the most appropriate for the historic building. But there's not a sort of hard no, you can't do this, you can't do that. I think we've got a pretty good track record of working with counties, not just on the grant project for which they receive funding, but also moving forward. And really, in a lot of ways, I'd look at it as a kind of added value because we've worked on a lot of courthouses. We may have some thoughts or ideas about how to implement something in a way that counties haven't thought of, or it's like, hey, did you think about trying it this way? Get you in touch with people who might have a good understanding about those designs and ways to implement those projects.
Thanks,
okay.
Trish. So I just want to confirm. It's so good to see you, by the way. I just want to confirm, if a county has applied for these and received these funds in the past, there's no period of time you need to wait to reapply. Is that correct?
That is correct. And thanks for the clarification. Yes, even if a county currently has an ongoing project in this current 25-27 biennium, the county is still eligible to apply moving forward. If a county received a grant or 2 or 3 in the past, you can still apply again moving forward. Okay. These are just and sorry, I should have mentioned, these are particulars to the application. So when you see the actual online application form and it's all online, these are the sections I'm referring to. So section 3 asks about historic designation. Section 4 asks about the project itself. And I just ask folks, be sure to include the total grant request in the field for section 4, not the total project cost, just the grant request. The county's asking for X number of dollars. And then there's a field in this section that asks for a brief summary of the program. There will be time later in the application to go into more detail. This is just literally a 2, 3, 4 sentence summary of, what we're looking to do that gives us an initial sense right off the bat in terms of what the request is for. Okay, section 5, when you get into section 5 on the form, we want all counties to organize their project into no more than 5 work elements. If it's only 1, that's fine. If it's 2, that's fine. But we want it to be no more than 5. What is a work element? Exterior rehabilitation. We want catch-alls. We don't want splitting hairs necessarily. So exterior rehabilitation, that could include masonry rehab. It could include window rehabilitation, exterior architectural features. That could be one work element. Similarly, interior rehabilitation could be a work element. Structural stabilization could be a work element. So again, think big buckets, not discrete, different, we're going to replace windows or we're going to refinish the interior woodwork. We don't want it that granular in terms of the project description. In this section, you'll be able to identify what that work element is and then use the narrative field to go into that detail about that work element. So again, if it's interior rehab is the overall work element, then you use the field that is to describe that work element to get into more of those details that I just mentioned. We're going to refinish historic marble. We're going to replace worn interior woodwork. That's where you would go through the narrative of those pieces. And then part of the reason we want to keep it to 5 work, no more than 5, and again, 1, 2, 3 is perfectly fine. We want to keep it to no more than 5 because we will then essentially use those work elements in the overall project budget as well. So whatever work elements you clarify and identify, we'll also use those in the project budget. And to that end, I want to just spend a little bit of time going over the budget worksheet. So again, those work elements from section 5 must be used on the budget worksheet. On the worksheet, we will break out A&E fees as a separate section. And I want to really emphasize, be sure to include a contingency there when you get to this section. And here's just a few examples of what this looks like. The project budget worksheet is a separate PDF. It's a fillable PDF that you need to download. And what I suggest all counties do is you download that, you fill it out, complete it, and then when you go to do the entire application online, you just upload this as a saved PDF. Here's a very simple look at what a project budget worksheet would look like, where you have a single work element and where you have a 50-50 grant to match ratio. And by 50-50, we mean for every grant dollar received, the county's matching it with the local dollar. You've got a roof replacement. We see our construction costs are $100,000. We know there's going to be $10,000 in A&E fees. And just because you never know what might happen, we're going to put in $10,000 of contingency. So we have our total expenses at $120,000. In this case, the grant request is half of that amount, $60,000. Proposing a cash match of $50,000 toward the project. And then the A&E fees, as you recall, have to count as match. Those can't be reimbursed. So they automatically will populate as, or you populate them as match for A&E fees. Now you see your grant request is $60,000. You're matching $60,000. Our total income is $120,000, that income being a combination of grants and local dollars. So our total expenses match our total income. Here you see the grant amount. Here you see the match, and everything lines up. This lower field is only if there's a grant matching discrepancy, and it will populate on its own. And this is where I'll take just a moment to talk about that sliding scale of match. So at the least, counties are required to match 25% of the grant request. So for instance, if you're requesting $100,000 in grant funds, the county has to match at least $25,000 of local funds for a total project of 125. There is a sliding scale for this project, for the criteria, the eligibility criteria. And the plainest way to say it is that the more match a county provides, the higher the county will score on that specific criteria. So if a county is going to provide that dollar for dollar match of 50-50, so to speak, as illustrated here, the county would score the maximum points total for that criteria. If the county is only going to provide the minimum of $25,000 match, then the county would score the lowest number of points possible in that criteria. And it steps up from 25% being the minimum. Counties that provide between 25 to 50% will score higher. If you provide 50% to 75%, you'll score higher. From 75% to 100% of the grant request, higher yet. And then, of course, if you're matching at 100%. Question came up about distressed counties. Do they have a reduced match? There's no reduced match, so to speak, but we have certainly seen situations where distressed counties have opted to include a reduced amount of that match. So for instance, a distressed county might only provide or propose to provide that minimum 25% match, or maybe it's in that 30 to 35% realm. So that is the way that's handled. It doesn't mean that there's no match whatsoever. It's just up to the county to determine what level of match that they want to provide. And as I say, if you can provide the full match, that's great. You get full points in that criteria. But I certainly understand realities. I will note that while the points and how the applications are reviewed based on point totals and then discussion among the review committee, those are then prioritized for recommended funding. I will note that certainly counties that have submitted or committed to a reduced amount of match, maybe in that 25 to 50% range rather than 100%, counties that have done that have still received grant funds. So it's not a quote unquote deal killer right off the bat. Okay, a couple other scenarios to look at here. This is one, same work element, but where you actually have a ratio of match to grant funds. So same thing, 100,000 in construction costs, 10,000 in A&E fees, 10,000 in contingency. Our overall expenses are 120. But in this case, the county's actually asking for $90,000. And they're going to match that 90,000 with 30,000, 20,000 in cash and 10 from the A&E fees. So when you look at this, $30,000 is 1/3 or 33% of the grant request of 90,000. So it's an eligible amount. Our matching discrepancy still shows as 0, which means you're in the realm of allowed required match. And a county could submit this way. The only time you'll see a number in this box is if at the end of the day, the county's proposed match does not come to or does not amount to 25%, at least 25% of the proposed grant request. That's when you'll see a number pop up here, and that's when you'll know you need to make some adjustments somewhere. Okay, moving through these. Pretty self-explanatory. This is now you've got 2 work elements: roof replacement, window rehabilitation. We still see, when all said and done with contingencies and fees, total expenses of $350. And in this case, the county's asking for $175,000 in funds, and they're going to match it 1-to-1 with $175,000 in matching dollars. So again, our total income matches our total expenses. The grant's 175, the match is 175, totally eligible and appropriate. Again, same look with 2 work elements, but with an increased grant request versus match. Same thing, 350,000 in total expenses, 350,000 in total income. So we know that those need to balance. But in this case, the grant request is going to be 250,000, whereas the county's proposed match is just 100,000. So again, in this case, we take 100,000 of 250,000. I don't have my exact calculator with me, but it's somewhere in the realm of 40%, I believe, if it's not exactly 40%. And in that case, again, 40% is an eligible and allowed percentage of match. So we don't see a discrepancy here, and all our numbers match up. Okay, the last example I want to show is one that does use prior capital expenditures. And so this is the one where, remember, expenditures made after January 1 of 2026 can count. And so here you've got a situation where we've added front entry accessibility. We've just added that as one of the elements. Construction costs were $50,000, but it was already completed. It's work that was done. And you know, the county knows it spent $50,000 on that. So we put it into the prior capital expenditures column. Aside from that, everything else is equal. We now have total project expenses of $410,000, including that 50,000 of prior capital expenses. We have total income of 410,000, and we want to make sure, of course, that the expenses for work already completed, it goes in both the expenses side and the income side, and the county had to pay for it, so we know that it costs this much. This was the budget for it. This was what was paid. So those are known figures, but they still need to be on both sides of the ledger, so to speak. And here's one where, at the end of the day, the county is asking for 205. The county is going to match with the proposed cash match and the prior capital expenditures added up. That becomes 205 as well. And here's your dollar for dollar match scenario, and everything pans out numbers wise. That same situation, again, where you've got that increased grant to match ratio. Here's one where the county is saying, okay, same thing. We know we did that work ahead of time. It's been completed. We can count it as match. But in this case, we're asking for $245,000 in grants. We're going to match it with $165,000. And again, it's not the one-to-one match, but it's match of about 40 some odd percent in this instance as well. And it makes it definitely eligible for the program. So these are just a few scenarios that lay out how to do these worksheets. I'm happy to work with any counties on filling out these sheets and including these numbers. Just a reminder that you do need to download this worksheet first and then complete that worksheet before you go. And well, I would say complete the worksheet first, and then when you go back to the online application form, you can just upload that completed worksheet. Okay. A few other things I'm going to go through pretty quickly, and then I'll open it up for questions for our last 10 minutes. Project feasibility. This is an entire section on the application, and it just asks for this information. So you'll see it very clearly on the application. Things like, are there plans and specs in hand? Does that still need to be developed? Are there studies that need to be done? Those kinds of questions. And I did actually get the date right here. Apologies for the typo earlier, but the project completion date is June 30th of 2029. Okay, we do have a section on courthouse perpetuity. We do want to know, to the degree that these funds will actually help or how they might impact the long-term preservation of the courthouse, specifically with regard to ongoing maintenance. And sometimes we see that ongoing maintenance costs can be increased if there is deferred maintenance overall that hasn't been addressed. And so some of the questions in this section ask about, if this project gets done, do you actually anticipate a impact to the annual budget for the courthouse, whether positive or negative? Hopefully positive, because it's addressing some deficiency in the building. So pretty self-explanatory, and the guidelines go through these as well. I talked about the sliding scale match, so I'm not going to rehash that right now. We went over that. I talked about the National Register of Historic Places. I talked about the standards compliance. I mentioned the local register. Again, some of our county courthouses are listed in the local register. I believe Jefferson County is one. I believe Spokane County is also listed locally. There is a process locally to go through in terms of talking to your local preservation staff about what you're going to do, but that's between you and the local entity. So I'm not going to spend more time on that now, but I'm happy to talk to any local counties about that interface with their local preservation commissions. And then the statement of support. This is the last piece that's on here. We do ask that every county that submits an application, that we do have a statement of support for that application from the elected body. So whether it's county council or whether it's county commissioners, we just want to know that the county electeds are aware that a application is being submitted and that you're supportive of it. It does not need to be an official commissioner resolution. If you want to do that, that's fine, but it doesn't need to be that. It simply needs to be just a letter or acknowledgement that yes, the county is aware, elected officials are aware that this has been submitted, and that just gets uploaded as part of the application process. This is just a list of some of the character features that I talked about earlier. You know, windows, brick patterns, parapets, all these kinds of things. Lighting can certainly be character defining. So as you're thinking about those types of projects, these are elements that could be wrapped into a project. And one thing to think about is if you know you have to, say, update boilers or update some mechanical or electrical, now's a good, if you know you're going to be doing that in the next 2 years, those dollars have to be matched anyway. If the county's going to spend them, this is a good opportunity to also look and assess some of those things that might be nice to haves, but you wouldn't necessarily have done them on your own. Given that that match work's going to happen anyway, might as well apply, and then you can get the grant funds to address some of the historic elements. So it's a way to leverage some of those need to haves with what some might think is nice to haves. We certainly think those character defining features are the need to haves as well. It's what makes our courthouses historic and what makes them unique. But I do understand that sometimes decisions have to be made about spending, and they don't always rise to the top of that priority list. The standards. This is basically what rehabilitation means. Rehabilitation means something very specific in the world of historic preservation. And so we use the standards for rehabilitation. I won't read it specifically. I've paraphrased already today. But again, it is the idea that we want to retain those key character defining features while understanding that compatible uses or continued use is the primary goal, and that our historic buildings are going to be best stewarded when they're used and not sitting vacant or don't have a good use for them. Okay, I'm going to stop there and open it up for any other questions people might have. I do have some, I do have photos that just demonstrate or illustrate some of the projects that have been done. If we don't get to those, that's fine. I think we'll make this slide deck available so folks can at a later time go through and take a look at some of the projects that have happened out there. But I'll take a minute just to see if there are any questions. I'm going to stop sharing because what I want to do is add a few things to the chat as well. In terms of where things live, but I'll certainly go through any questions if people have them.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions from the group?
Yeah, Heather.
I'm just wondering, I'm going to again apologize. I missed the first bit of your presentation, but
You're fine.
Can you talk a little bit about seismic retrofit if you didn't already? Is that, I mean, I know that the focus is on the historic elements of the building, but when we look at keeping our buildings standing in the event of a regional emergency, are there elements of seismic retrofit that would be eligible for this program?
Yes, seismic retrofits are eligible, just plain and simple.
Period.
Yeah, period.
Great.
We're working right now with San Juan County. They received a grant in the current biennium, and it is a seismic retrofit for the great courthouse they have in Friday Harbor.
Awesome. Great.
Yep.
Thank you so much. No, that's a big concern for ours.
Yep. And Tyler, I'll just respond. Yes, there's a lower match. The other consideration based on the county being distressed, yeah, the committee does look at that, and there are additional considerations. It's not necessarily in the form of added points, but it is in the form of acknowledgement on the part of the committee that distressed counties all counties face challenges right now. I don't want to understate that fact, but certainly those counties in distressed areas even have another layer of challenges. I will also note that the committee does know this is a statewide program, and they do want to see good geographic distribution as well. You know, if we only receive applications from the east side of the state, obviously we can't. There's not a whole lot we can do with that. But assuming that there will be applications that come in from both sides, we do want to see some of that geographic distribution. One of the things I'll note is that the steering committee, let's just say 10 applications are received. If all 10 applications reflect projects that are eligible, that meet the standards, in the past, we've seen the committee recommend funding for all 10. Now, there does need to be a priority list. So it'll go from 1 to 10, right? And it'll be in order. But there's nothing that says the committee can only recommend X number of counties for funding. If they receive 10 applications and all 10 are good projects, they can recommend all 10. In turn, the agency, DAHP, can request funding for all 10 as well. What it comes down to is when the governor reviews requests, and it starts with when the governor submits the administration's proposed capital budget, does that proposed capital budget include funding for some of the projects on the recommended list, or all of them? And then, of course, all of the governor's budget proposals ultimately go to the legislature. And as you all very well know, the legislature is the one that makes the final decision. But again, the legislature will look at that list of prioritized recommendations, and they could fund the full list. They could say, you know what? We only think we can do $3 million in funding this year, and they'll go down the list until they hit that number of 3 million. Maybe that funds 5 projects. Maybe it funds 3. Those are the kinds of deliberations that they go through. But I just wanted to note that there's no limit on the number of projects that the steering committee can actually recommend and provide a prioritized list for.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
And I'll just add to that, as one of their partner organizations, we certainly, Chris gives us the list and also where full funding is at, and WASAC will advocate for full funding to try to get as many projects that are worthwhile completed.
Perfect.
And Melissa, I see you've asked in the chat, will this recording of this webinar be available? Yes, we will post this. Mitch, can you remind me where you put recordings on the website?
Yeah, it's under the wasac.org/learn, but also I'm going to make this one available on like YouTube afterwards too. So it'll be a little bit easier to share around.
Perfect. Any other questions? I know we're approaching time here.
And as mentioned, we'll make this slide deck available on our website as well. So you can go download that. And Mitch, I can send it to you too if you want to have it on WASAC's site. In fact, I think I already did send it to you. So folks can download it and review any of the slides as needed. And I will go back and share real quickly because I realized I did not put let me go to the very last slide that has my contact info on it. Always good to include that. And I can put it in the chat as well. But if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. You see the number there, as well as my email address. Happy to talk to any county about potential projects. To the degree that schedule and timing allows, I'm happy to come, whether it's myself or one of my colleagues who works on this program as well. Happy to come to the courthouse, visit the courthouse, and take a look at what you have, potential projects, and just talk through them with folks. So that is certainly something we can commit to, as they say, schedule allowing.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris. And thank you all for joining us again. We'll look forward to seeing your project proposals. I'll go through the process. And with that, we'll let you enjoy the remaining couple minutes of your afternoon before I'm sure you've all got meetings after this. Thanks again. And Chris, we appreciate your partnership.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a great program and a lot of fun to work on.
Have a great day, everyone.